I had this kind of like form email I sent to a couple of people. I had a professor whose son wanted to do it, and I sent him, must have been the most discouraging email you could send someone, because I think that you need to discourage people as much as possible, because these programs like Ryerson Sports Media, like what are you selling? That is a waste of money, and there are no jobs for those people. So I tell people, don't do this. Here's every reason why you shouldn't do it. And then if they don't care about any of that, then I have great hopes for them.
My guest today is the assistant sports editor at the Globe and Mail in Toronto, and he's written for a number of other outlets as well, including Major League Baseball. There's some great career advice for anyone who's looking to break into a competitive industry. It might be your dream job, but you're not sure where to start and you're thinking of maybe giving up. Really enjoyed this chat. Hope you do as well. This is my conversation with Jamie Ross. All right, so Jamie Ross, thank you very much for being with us today. When was the last time I saw you? I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago. The first and last time before today.
That's right. It's been a long time. It's probably been 4 or 5 years. Time really flies. We've communicated since then.
Yeah.
And in that time, I've actually met your sister, who is now a colleague of mine.
How long did it take you to clue in that we were related?
I think I knew right away, because the last name gave it away, because
it's pretty unique.
You had told me that she worked there.
Okay.
So
have you guys chatted at all?
Lots. We chat a lot now.
No way.
Yeah, she sits right behind me.
Isn't that a small world?
I know. When I first started, I don't know that I spoke to her for the first few years, because I don't know that I ever encountered her.
Right.
I think she sat somewhere.
Oh yeah,
nowhere near me.
You guys moved buildings, right? Were you in the old building as well?
Yeah. So I started in the old building at Spadina and King.
Yeah.
And when the paper was in there, that building was massive in it, and the sprawl of the newsroom was
really big,
vast.
Yeah.
So the sports department was kind of tucked away in the very back. I called it the graveyard, because there were no windows. It was pitch black.
Yeah.
And all the desks were just empty, because so many people had left over the years, not anytime recently, but over 10 and 20 years. And they'd been in the same building, and they never really repurposed the office. So we sat in this really dark corner, way far away from the news desk, which is where Carly would have been stationed. But then when we moved to our new spot at King East in a brand new building.
What a nice building.
It's a beautiful building, and there's a lot more sunlight. I sit next to a window, so that's the whole.
You guys have a great view up there.
Great view of the lake and downtown. And so now she sits right behind me, so I see her every day. And
is she an irritating office mate?
No, she's really great.
I've lived with her, so.
Well, you can say all the things that you want to say about her and get away with it.
Exactly.
I think she is an incredible journalist and actually a very lovely person, and we've chatted a few times. And I brought you up. I told her that how I had known you incidentally, and
I want to get into that.
Yeah, that whole thing is crazy, and I have a lot of nice things to say about you. Because I feel like I have a debt of gratitude to you.
Not at all.
For a little bit of a morale boost that you gave me about 5 years ago when I was about ready to jump off the ship and go back to the Maritimes, where I'm from.
So, I want to chat about that now, I guess, because I find it, because I've followed I did a talk, I think, for one of your, was it Humber?
You know what?
Or which class was it?
You didn't actually do a talk for a class I was in, but I knew Vivian McQuaid.
Oh, I did a talk
who teaches
at the school, and
she told me, I think she could sense that I was not feeling great about my prospects and where I was.
Had you talked to her?
Life. I haven't talked to her since.
No, but was it a public relations program, or what were you in?
Right.
Yeah. It was at Humber?
It was a postgraduate diploma. So I enrolled in it kind of on a whim. It was basically my excuse to leave New Brunswick. I had,
because you had done some reporting work out east,
right?
Like a couple different jobs.
Yes, I had a number of jobs at daily and weekly newspapers out there, and I had felt like I'd hit a ceiling, and I had kind of gotten a little bit screwed over when a hiring came up. At the paper, my last paper.
Was it the Gleaner?
That was the last paper I was on staff at. It was kind of funny the way I'm pretty sure. I'll just digress into this because it is part of how I got here. But I was working at the Daily Gleaner in the first year out of my journalism program when I had graduated, and I was in the sports department. I had an awesome job.
Right.
This paper was a city paper, and they actually covered all the local sports in a really intense manner. So high school sports, which I loved covering, university sports, which I loved covering, and which I had done already when I worked for the student newspaper when I was in school.
Right.
So I had a really great job. And for about 18 months, I was just a sports reporter in this kind of 3-man department at the Daily Gleaner with 2 other excellent veteran journalists who were so nice and kind to me.
Let's give him a shout out.
It's Bruce Hallahan. He was the sports editor, and Bill Hunt, who is a columnist and editor. And they're both still at the paper. I'm still in touch with both of them.
That's great.
Bill Hunt, in fact, was widely credited with starting the movement to get Willie O'Ree, the first black NHLer, into the Hockey Hall of Fame last year.
Wow.
Because he had delivered kind of a call to action in one of his columns. This goes to show you the power of local journalism, if anything. I did do a story about it for the Globe and Mail as well, but about his movement that he started. He did a call to action where he said, how is it possible that one of the most influential and important figures in hockey history doesn't have a place in the Hall of Fame? Not that his NHL career was long enough to merit a spot as to be inducted as a player. But it was the
relevance of...
But it was there's a builder category, right. And it was almost unfathomable to him that he wouldn't be in there. So he wrote this column, and it was just for the Fredericton audience, and they love Willie O'Ree in Fredericton. He's born and raised, and their greatest export, I would say.
Right.
And it caught the eye of a few of Willie's old friends, and they were kind of like, oh yeah, why not? And so then they contacted Bill, and they said, we're going to put together a submission because the Hall has this public submissions process. And through that, they started canvassing locally, and then regionally, and then nationally, and then internationally. And when it was said and done, they had something like a 70-page document with signatories from, like I said, across the world, and including some important hockey players, Joel Ward and Wayne Simmons, two players, 2 black NHL players, who kind of described what Willie had done for them, what he meant for them. And so Willie went into the Hall of Fame, and Bill Hunt just had this idea, and it kind of snowballed into a real movement.
Wow. Is he alive still?
Yes, Bill or Willie.
The
columnist.
No, the hockey player.
Yeah. Willie's still alive. He works for the National Hockey League. In fact, I went home for a wedding in the summer, and of course, New Brunswick being what it is, he was sitting ahead of me on the plane.
Small world.
And everyone knows him there, obviously. Like I said, he's Fredericton's greatest export, and he goes home often. He still has a lot of old friends. And the thing about Willie is that he is such a humble man, is that he never would have started this movement of his own volition, right? He never craves that kind of attention. And so someone else had to do it for him. And of course, the community was going to get behind the movement.
That's awesome.
And that started with the local sports column.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a great story.
I think, we'll talk about the state of journalism in general, but I believe like it's at a not great place on a macro level. And I hope that there will be like a rebound at some point. And I think it's going to start in small towns. I think that's where it's going to start.
That would be fantastic.
That's where it's been. That's where it got gutted first.
Right.
We lost the classified sections, and then people started getting fired, and like now they have these websites that I can't even call them really news outlets. They're just basically a collection of news releases that they get sent, and they just put all these links. So we'll chat about that in a bit. But so jumping back to Vivian. So was it Humber that you were at?
Yes.
So I had gone in and done a talk to some class, like her class that year. And so I had this, I just had this, I had spent 20 years just kind of working, and I'd never, giving back is such a cheesy kind of cliche phrase, but I just had my head down and realizing what a struggle it was getting out of school and starting a career. And I thought, I'd like to help someone else if I could. So contacted a few people. I didn't really know Vivian. I was introduced to her by someone else, and then she said, would you come into my class and have a little talk? So I went in, and I think this might have been the time, like her mom was sick or had passed away or something around there. And so she wasn't even able to be in the class that day, I think she had to go because her mom, something had happened. And so I had 1 hour with the class, and my talk was called 14 PR Lessons I Learned the Hard Way. And it was basically these like life lessons that I thought might be able to help them in their careers to cut some corners or save some time or save some aggravation or whatever. And very frank, very blunt. Like there were people crying, like sad, like happy, the people like laughing, cursing. It was like a really interesting, I thought a very interesting day. Where I said in the Q&A, I said, ask me anything. Like there's nothing off limits. I like about salaries and jobs and politics and the offices and journalism versus PR and all this kind of stuff. So it was really interesting. And then the next day I get I think an email from her saying, would you be up for talking to one of the kids in my class? I'm just kind of paraphrasing. Maybe this might be different, but she said he has a dream of being in, I think it was sports journalism, and he's kind of like hitting these walls and he's kind of ready to pack it in. Like, I think that's like, I don't know if that's accurate.
That's how I was feeling. I don't know if your recollection is a confluence of what she told you, maybe what I told you after that. But yes, that is where mentally I was at that point.
And when you say pack it in, what does that mean?
Well, so I had come to Toronto because, like I said, I felt I'd hit a ceiling in New Brunswick. I had been screwed over for a job, I felt. Anyway, whether or not that's true, it's probably up for debate. But I just thought, if I don't leave now, I'll never leave. So I just packed my car and left. And I enrolled at Humber because I had some former classmates from my journalism program who had years before had left and did this program, and they were working. And I thought, it's 8 months. If I just go and do this class, I'll at least get a job in Toronto and I can figure things out from there. It's essentially, Humber has a great reputation in that program whereby they place people and those people get hired.
It seems like a great program.
It really is. And it's very intensive, and I don't think I was quite ready for the work. And I also don't think I really appreciated what the job would be. And as much as I liked the program and as much as I liked my professors and my classmates, I was not crazy about the actual job. And again, I just thought I needed to do something to get to Toronto.
The job of public relations.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the track you were in. You're going to become work at a corporate communications firm or something.
I don't really believe that I was ever going to do that. I just knew that Toronto was an expensive city.
You just wanted to be,
and I wanted to get here, and I knew I needed something.
Yeah.
And I felt like if I couldn't hook on journalistically, which I knew would not happen overnight, that I wanted to be able to do something. And I was assured by my former classmates that if I just spent 6 months or whatever it was, or I don't remember how long the program was. It was a short program. Then I would be able to get a job, and at least that way I could figure things out and still be able to pay my rent.
Right.
Now that all fell apart very quickly.
As it often does.
Exactly. I finished the program, but about 2 months in, I was like, I hate this.
What did you not like about it?
Because I had been a journalist for probably 3 or 4 years, obviously I was still young and probably thought more of myself in that respect than I was actually capable of doing. But I didn't really agree with the methods. As someone who was on the end of a lot of those releases, I was like, this is... I don't agree with anything what you guys are teaching. Like, I don't.
Did you ever bring that up, or did you just kind of?
I tried to, but in their defense, they didn't really care, and I didn't want to sound like a know-it-all. And the professors, the professors there are really accomplished. Like, I'm not saying they don't know what they're talking about. I just felt like maybe it had been a while since they'd had a little refresher from someone actually in the business. But was I in the business? Well, I was a flamed-out 25-year-old journalist. So like,
that is a little harsh.
Well, but you know what I mean? Like I had started with high hopes, and then after 3 years and a lot of grinding, I felt like I had taken 2 steps backwards, which is why I moved to Toronto to try to get back ahead. So the program ended, and before the program ended, I knew I wanted to do journalism. Like, if anything, this program helped validated why I got into journalism in the first place. And it did reinvigorate my love for it. So I actually started hustling very hard. But before that happened, I did meet you because I was disenfranchised. Right. Vivian did connect us. And I still was thinking, forget all this, I'm going home. And you invited me. I'll just tell the story how we met.
Yeah.
You invited me to Finn McCool's, I think, on the Esplanade. And we had many beers.
How many?
Well,
I thought it was like 2.
Maybe. I mean, you paid for them. We were there
for a while.
We were there for a while. And you told me your story and your journalistic background. And you reinstilled the fire that I had remembered having at one point, that you can't rest on your laurels, and you ultimately can't just throw the towel in, because really it's a war of attrition, and a lot of people are going to throw the towel in. So if you don't,
you just have to be a little bit better than them
and hang around a little bit longer, right? So that's kind of the thrust of the pep talk you gave me, but it was a very inspirational pep talk because I was reinvigorated and I did realign my goals. And from there, started making a lot more calls, started marketing myself a lot more aggressively locally to journalists and people who I thought might be able to help me, who would be willing to meet with me, for nothing, just for a coffee. That's not easy. People are very busy. But because I had connections, this person knew that person, I was able to wrangle a freelance gig from Canadian Press, a freelance gig from Associated Press, a freelance gig from Sportsnet, a lot of freelance, not a lot of money.
Yeah.
Still not enough to pay the bills.
Right.
So I ended up taking a job in PR.
Where did you work?
So I worked at this firm called North Strategic.
Oh, yeah.
Which is an excellent firm.
They're the high-tech guys, right?
They may be now. I'm not sure. They don't do timesheets, which was a big draw for me. They were excellent, and they still are.
Is it Mia Pearson?
Yes, that's right. Maya and Justin Creeley. Those are
she's got a column in the Globe, I think, on communications.
Yes, she's written for the Globe, and they've actually sold the company. They still run it, but they sold it to who's the conglomerate, MSL or something like that.
Omnicom. Or, one of those.
And I mean, they're a professional operation and incredible
I've heard
people.
Only good things.
But they work very, very hard. And again, I was the lowest form. I started as an intern and was hired as a coordinator, which I was happy with. I had a job, but I was making nothing.
Yeah.
So I was freelancing on the weekends. I'm not kidding. I worked 7 days a week.
Yeah.
I would leave North Strategic on a Tuesday night, having gotten an email from the sports editor at the Canadian Press at noon saying, "Can you cover the Leafs game tonight?" I would run from North Strategic on King West after work down to the ACC to cover a Leafs Lightning game.
Yeah.
For $150.
There's a lesson in that. There's this backlash against, they call it hustle porn, like people talking about how hard they have to work. And like, in some ways, I think like there's what other way you're going to get it done? Like I think anyone who's achieved, like the guy who I just interviewed before you, like just working, but like ideally loving what you're doing too at the same time. So it sounds like, covering the game, working your day job, running down to the game, $150, it all adds up. But like, it's the experience, right? And you become, it's the connections and all of that. Like that's something that, I don't know, like that not a lot of people seem willing to do. Like I've had pep talks like that, like the one we had with you, with a bunch of other people who just like, you could see their eyes kind of glazing over and like, I'm not doing all that shit. Is there a faster way to do that? Is there a different way to do that? And I'm like, not really. So it's interesting to see. So I was following you. So we had that. We'll go back to the beer afternoon. Mm-hmm. So now that I'm thinking of it, it was a couple hours, I think.
Yeah, it was absolutely.
What made you like? Because as far as you're concerned, like who the hell's this guy?
Right.
And so you're like, you got to be going in with kind of some skepticism. Give me one of these old geezers telling me about like, you know what I mean?
Vivian spoke very highly of you. And she obviously thought that you were someone who could connect with me. And I got along with her really well. And I think she probably recognized the kind of person I was and maybe thought that we would be compatible in that respect. So it was a good match make. I just remember you telling me about your experience at Western and your attempt to kind of get through the door at TSN.
Yeah. Well, no. Yeah. Everywhere I tried to go, they told me no, or closed the door. And I realized that like, that doesn't really mean no. You just have to just nudge a little bit more. I think that was the basic gist of it.
Pretty sure you told me when I suggested that maybe I would just give up. I'm pretty sure you said, well, no, you can't do that. Like something so frank as like, well, that's not an option. And I thought, that's a good point. That's not an option.
Well, if you want it, right?
Right.
And it sounds cliche, it sounds cheeseball, but getting into TSN, I had applied for an internship there from Western. And so first of all, I was in the journalism program and we could go to any newsroom as long as they would accept us. And there was a list of them. And, there's a funny story here with my sister as well. But like, I said that I'm going to apply to TSN. And then the people on like our professors said, well, they've never taken anyone from here, so you probably shouldn't apply there. And I'm like, well, I get three choices. Why don't I try it? So I applied to TSN. And then one of the guys who was in my class came up to me and he thought he was doing me like a courtesy. He's a nice guy and he's still working there. Actually, he came over and said, "Hey, you know, I have like a brother or a relative or something at TSN and I'm applying for an internship there. So just to let you know, you're probably not going to get it. So you might want to," like, he's kind of being nice, but that only pissed me off more.
Yeah.
And so then I wrote this is back in the days of fax machines. You probably never used one of those, but like I wrote a fax to the executive producer of the show. And
what show is it? Do you remember?
Inside Sports with Dave Hodge. And so the producer was a guy named John Panikar. And I think went to Discovery Channel later. So and I don't even know the guy. I just knew his name because he was the guy. So I wrote him a one-page note, scrawled with a pencil and on a fax. And I said, you know, here are, I said something along the lines of like, and this is me, like, you know, I'm probably not going to get it, so I have nothing to lose. And so that was my opinion. So I wrote this fax that said, working at TSN would be my dream job. I would kill and maim for you. I've done so I'll do anything you want. And I said, I've done tons of sports related articles this year. And I hope the fact that I haven't padded my resume with a bunch of bullshit doesn't impede me getting this dream job. Thank you very much, Warren Weeks, whatever. So he sent it through the fax machine. And then I got a call from him saying, have you done any articles this year? I said, yeah, I've done like 3. I can think of them right now. One was about a goalie equipment store or something in London. He said, okay, send me those things right now by fax. Send them to me now. And so he's thinking, like, am I bullshitting him? So I went and I copied them out and I faxed them over. And it was about a week later, I was sitting at home with my buddies and I got a call. How'd you like to come work at TSN? And so we both ended up getting an internship. So the guy got one on Sports Desk, which was with Brendan Connor and Michael Landsberg, who's Michael Landsberg's big in the sort of depression awareness community now. And I ended up on Inside Sports. And so, like, you know, we created a spot, and just by that little extra nudge.
That's right.
I didn't mean to monopolize this. I want to hear more about you.
No, that's a valid, that was the story you told me. I remember it very clearly. And I remember leaving there just feeling that I at least did owe it to myself to give it another shot. And that did precipitate all of the calls that I made after that to everyone I knew. And the biggest break that I got was twofold. Someone I knew from Canadian Press was kind enough. She didn't have to do this. She was a low person there, a new person. I said, I want to meet your sports editor. Would you make an introduction? And she could have been, well, that's asking a lot, or I don't want to inconvenience my boss, which I get. I have a boss. Like, I don't want to inconvenience that person.
You don't want to
busy.
make their life difficult.
No. She said yes. So Julie Scott, who is no longer the sports editor at CP, I think she's out of the business right now, but she was for a long time the CP sports editor and was an excellent sports editor. And she said, to her credit, come on in, I'll show you around. First thing she said to me though is, I don't have a job for you, which obviously, but she knew what I was doing. She knew I was
right
new
out of the
in
gate.
town.
She lets you in the door.
Yeah, right
and
into the
she's
newsroom.
honest with you right out of the gate.
I was walking around a professional newsroom in Toronto. I'd only been there for a matter of months, and I didn't know anyone. Yeah. So to me, being invited in was a win. And
huge win.
I tried to be so casual about it, but I obviously mentally was freaking out. She introduced me to the whole sports department.
And you know all these
people.
Yeah,
I knew all of them in name exactly. And then we sat in her office and chatted and just shot the breeze. And at the end of it, she offered me freelance work if I could pitch her stories.
That day.
Yeah, that day.
Even though she said, I don't have a job.
She said, I don't have a job, but I think she meant, full time. But and even almost an even more incredible one. And this was the biggest break I got in Toronto. Was I contacted an old colleague who was a sports reporter at the Telegraph Journal, because the guy who covered the Blue Jays for Major League Baseball, MLB.com, was a St. Johner. And I remembered reading in the Telegraph Journal a little feature this guy wrote about the guy covering the Jays. So the St. John reporter wrote one about the guy from St. John covering the Blue Jays. So I wrote him, Scott Briggs. I'm not sure where he is now, but he was also very helpful. Like, I have 1 million people who helped me get a job in this business, and it's so hard to do. That's why I really don't want to make it sound like I'm curing cancer here. I'm a sports editor. It's not glamorous, but it's a really difficult industry to break into. And if I hadn't leveraged all these contacts, I wouldn't have. And so he said, sure, I'll make a connection. So I had to go back to St. John with a phone call. Calls the guy in Toronto, and Gregor Chisholm, who's recently left the MLB.com. He's now the new baseball columnist at the Toronto Star.
Right.
A young guy, but has been doing it a very long time, got a real early start. He met me for coffee. And I had seen, and this, I remember specifically still being at Humber, but like thinking, I'm never going to do this. Like, I'm never going to do public relations, so I got to get a journalism job. I can remember finding this job posting on an American sports message board. And it was for the associate reporter program, it was called, that MLB.com does in every city.
Right.
And it's highly applied to by American students at big colleges, right? A coveted sports summer job paid in American dollars. So you can imagine that people are coming out of, like, I know people that like Harvard, that went to Harvard, that did this job in whichever city, Boston, New York, Milwaukee, they all took them. So there would be 30 at this time, 30 different people in universities would have the opportunity to cover Major League Baseball and get paid to do it. So I saw this posting and I thought, well, this is interesting because there is one Canadian team. Do they do that? Because if they do, I don't have to compete against any of those Americans because none of them would take a 6-month job in Canada because the hoops you'd have to jump through immigration would be
ridiculous,
and they wouldn't want to anyway. So I'm like, that would really limit the pool of applicants if this is real and it happens. So in the back of my mind, when Gregor agreed to meet me, fellow Maritimer, new Maritimer, can you just tell me how the business is going? I was kind of sandbagging him a little bit because in the back of my mind, I really wanted to ask him about this program. And we had an amazing conversation and he was very helpful and generous with his time. And then at the end of it, I said, oh, before I leave, I saw this posting. Do you know what this program is? And does Toronto take applicants? So they do it. And he said, oh yeah, I did that program.
No way.
Yeah. And he said, I'll tell my boss I met you. And I thought, okay, great. So he followed up with me a day later, send me all your stuff. I'm going to send it to my boss. He said, apply, but I'll also send stuff. And I had to jump through all the same hoops that all the applicants did, writing tests,
for sure,
interview. But ultimately it got me the job because Gregor told me later that his boss basically called him and said, his boss probably has 1,000 applicants to sift through for these jobs, right? Not just for the Toronto one, but all of them across the major leagues. So he basically said, look, you're the one who's gonna have to be working with this kid all summer.
You vouch for this
Can
kid.
you work for him or can he work for you or not? And he just said, yeah.
So that was that call that
done.
did it.
I was hired.
It's so funny because like on the outside, we hang out, we have a couple of beers in the afternoon, we have this chit chat, which I enjoyed equally. Mm-hmm. And then we go our separate ways. And then I'm following you online. And then I'm like, holy shit, he's writing for the Blue Jays. Like it seemed like it, obviously, I think it was 5 or 6 months later.
Well, it would have been that year though, because we met in the winter. I remember it was cold.
I think we were in November, so and you were there in the spring. You were writing for them.
That's right.
And so I was so happy for you when I saw that. And I think I actually sent you a note saying, holy shit, and I was reading your stuff. Mm-hmm. And you'd already been there for a bit. Like I missed when you started, but I went back and I looked and I thought, wow, this is fantastic. So what's the takeaway to someone else in your position? Because you know that there are countless people out there, and like it might be architecture or design or zoology or whatever. It doesn't have to be journalism, but like to me, this is something you can apply across industries, across sectors. I think people just give up too quickly. Like they get a little bit of reluctance or resistance, and it's easy to get down on yourself and you just kind of like throw in the towel. So, and then you end up working at, I don't know, like not Sears, I guess Sears doesn't exist anymore, but like, if you have, and again, it sounds cheeseball, if you have a dream, a thing that you want to do, what would be the takeaway for you that you would share with somebody else?
Well, I wish I had something more insightful to say, but it's pretty cut and dried how it worked out for me. It was almost a refusal to throw in the towel. And like I said this earlier, it is a war of attrition. It is all kinds of people going toward the same goal. And if it's a field that is highly sought after, like many of them are, like you said, architecture, broadcasting,
just examples,
journalism, it can be anything. If there is a good job, people are going to want it. But how hard are they willing to work for it? Well, probably very hard. In fact, I don't doubt that there were more qualified people to take any of the jobs that I've had. Smarter, better writers, probably nicer.
Not better hair though.
Well, no. Right now I've got some long hair going on.
Well, I'll put that in the show.
Your
notes.
listeners won't
Love
be
it.
able to see, yes.
Yeah.
But it was almost, and I'm sure this applies to other businesses, but showing up is so important, and not giving in is also important. And the showing up element is not just about being there on time and always being there on time, but also doing the job that you're told you must do and being reliable. And I think one of the reasons I'm now at the Globe and Mail in the deputy sports editor role is because my boss saw someone that she could count on and be reliable, that if something needs to get done, it's getting done, and she doesn't have to worry about it. She doesn't have to worry that I'm not going to do it or I'm not going to show up, because I've encountered so many people in my career to date, starting when I was sports editor at the college newspaper, that just, wouldn't turn an assignment in. And I'm thinking, are you crazy? You're a journalism student. You said you were going to do this. Yeah, you said you were going to do a story for me.
Job.
It's 5:00 Sunday. We're going to production for Monday. Where's the story? And then I just don't hear from them. And I thought, well, what the hell is that? So you can't. There's a lot of people you just can't depend on. So, and things happen. And if you can't get it done, that's fine. Like, you got to tell someone. Like, there are steps to mitigate.
Or just get it done.
Well, or get it done. But if you've broken,
those people end up getting weeded out, right? Over time. Like, it sounds so. I don't know. It sounds to me so obvious. Like you said, surprisingly, people didn't get their story. It is surprising. Mm-hmm. Like, if you want to get into a profession, like I always, when I was younger, right, and getting into the workforce, I would always imagine, because there was no Twitter, but I imagined hundreds or thousands of people fighting for the same thing you wanted, and imagining what are they going to do? Because there's a lot of industrious people, hard workers, smart people with better connections. I had no connections. And so you have to stand out from that. And I think the only reliability, like you talked about, just showing up, getting the job done, being someone that no matter what happens, Jamie's going to get it done. And so that over time, over 5, 10, 15 years makes the difference in a career, I think.
Absolutely. Because ultimately you just need that last person you worked with to tell the person that you want to work with, yeah, I have nothing but good things to say about this person. They don't even have to be specific. They could just say, yeah, he'd be great for you. Done. Like I don't know exactly how I got so lucky to get this job right now, but I feel like I was blue collar in my approach to what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I think that, as blue collar as sports journalism can be, but I think my boss
it's like a workman,
recognized,
the industrious approach to getting the job done.
And it's not even that simple. And I wish it were. There are so many factors that keep people down and out of the business that are totally unfair. Obviously, people from marginalized communities have a way more difficult,
for sure,
chance to get a start, and those blocks are thrown up, I feel, at every turn for some people, and so it's easy for me to sit here and say just work hard and it'll work out for you. I'm aware that that's not true for everyone.
It doesn't always work out. But
Right.
But it won't work out unless you do.
Exactly. No, that's absolutely true.
Like, if I think about today, if I were starting out today and I was trying to get writing clients, and I cold called people and they're not interested in that, and you'd send out emails and they wouldn't get responded to. If I had to do it today, I think one of the things I would do is find pieces, I would create original content for that company and send it to them. Or back in the day, what this would and I actually did this with some clients. I would take news releases, Canada Newswire. They have hundreds of news releases sent out. I'd find a company that I wanted to work for, and I would find a news release that they'd sent out that sucked, and I would edit it. I would mark it up in Word or whatever. You'd see all the markups. And I would send it to the head of communications or the CEO and say, you guys sent out a news release today. I think it could have been better. Here's my version of it. And no ask. And, one time out of 10, that turns into business. They'd say, well, can you write our annual report, or can you just because you're giving them something right out of the gate that who's going to do that? Who's going to invest 2 hours to rewrite a news release?
And 2 hours is really nothing. And ultimately 1 out of 10 is not a bad success
It's not bad at all. And, 2 hours is not a big commitment when you're not doing anything. You know what I mean? When you're sitting there unemployed, 2 hours is nothing.
You'll be watching Netflix.
So you're a sports fan, obviously, and I know you played hockey when you were younger. Has covering the business changed your love of sports? Like, has it diminished it? Like, has it made it too much like work? You know what I mean? Like, can you watch sports the same way you used to?
Yeah, I probably watch sports. I probably enjoy it now more than I ever have. There was a period of time when I stopped watching it altogether before I
It's
kind
like
of
too much.
got into it. Yeah. Growing up, I think when I was kind of 19, 20, 21, I really stopped paying attention to it altogether, besides hockey, because I was playing hockey at the time. And it wasn't until really I moved to Toronto, because when I was in Fredericton working in the sports department, I covered local sports, but I didn't have cable. Like, I couldn't afford it. The streaming services weren't as available then as they are now. So I really didn't even watch much of it back then, to be honest. Now I watch a ton of it, and I do love it. And there's almost too much to keep up with. And we're a small department, and that can be difficult, because when I go somewhere and I talk to someone about my job, they think I'm going to know
everything.
Well, they think I'm going to know, like, how many yards Tom Brady threw for yesterday.
Yeah.
And, well, I don't know. I don't need, like, you
can ask Siri, though.
Yeah. Well, sure. Well, they can also ask Siri too. Like, why are you asking me? So I can't watch everything.
There's a lot of stuff happening.
There's so much of it. And I don't want, sports is a big part of my life because it is my job. I want to do other things.
What's your favorite sport to cover?
Tennis.
Why is that?
I think it has more to do with, there's this strange animalistic approach to tennis where it's almost like a dog chasing a ball. And I think it even goes back probably biologically to how we watched people, fall in love with the game Pong on Atari, right? Back and forth, but you could sit there and just play forever. Tennis is equal parts athletic and artistic. It's a very fluid and quite beautiful sport to watch, too. And absolutely mental. And ultimately it's one-on-one, which kind of the stakes are a little higher. There's more tension. It feels like it.
You can't blame it on someone else. The goalie.
No, that's it. And it's a very lonely sport. It's two guys, two women out there, slugging it out. And so I really do love that sport. I could watch tennis all day. If there's a 5-set match, some of them go for 4 or 5 hours. I'll watch the whole thing.
Did you see the U.S. Open women's final? Did you see that match with Bianca?
Oh, absolutely.
That was one of the best tennis matches I've ever seen.
She was unstoppable.
It was unbelievable.
It was absolutely unbelievable. We sent Cahal Kelly, our national sports columnist, there. He was at Arthur Ashe Stadium to cover it. And it was one of, if not the biggest moment in Canadian sports history, because tennis is a global sport. People scoff at me when I tell them I like tennis sometimes, but I just try to remind them, like, it's a global sport, right? Hockey's big, but it's niche, and
it's Canada and some states,
Nordic countries as well. Yeah. But tennis is played the world over. It's, as you said, there's no teams. It's one person.
Yeah.
And the stakes are very high, and it's very difficult to win a low-level tournament, let alone a major. And no Canadian had ever done that, as you know. At that age, too. And at that age.
I got to see her in the prior match at the Rogers Cup. Like, not the championship, because the championship game, it was only 19 minutes, and Serena forfeited or whatever. But I saw the one before, and I'd never seen live tennis. And I'm looking at him like, this is something special. Like, this, she is a beast. And the way she was talking to herself and getting, like, I think it would be very easy. Was she 19 or something?
Yes.
It'd be so easy for you at certain points in that match to just crumble. And she seemed to just steal herself. It was like, I'd never seen anything like that. And I wish I had put some money on her for the U.S. Open. Just steamrolled everybody.
And I have no reason to think she won't do the same thing this year.
Do that for like another 10, 15 years.
Well, this is it. What are we seeing the beginnings of?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the whole of Canadian tennis is really on a massive upswing right now, because there are some really good young men's players, not to the level of Bianca Andreescu. She's far and away the face of the sport in Canada, but there are a number of players inside probably the top 30 on the men's tour as well. And I don't know when this happened. I know we all remember Genie
gradual,
Bouchard and,
for sure.
and Milos Raonic.
Yep.
They were kind of the first ones to burst onto the singles scene
Yeah.
in the modern game. But suddenly you look around and there's a lot of good Canadian tennis players.
So if that's the sport you enjoy most, what I want to ask you what you enjoy least. I want to put you on the spot, but how much of your job is writing versus editing? Like, it would talk about the role of an editor a little bit in terms of, like, what does a typical week look like for you at this point?
It's a lot of different things, and it changes as our department changes. So we've had people leave over the years. We've had people
Like some big names
retire.
too.
Absolutely.
Like Dave Schultz.
David Schultz just retired.
There was another. Who's the other guy?
Roy McGregor.
Yeah, just icons.
Absolutely.
And so was that part of, like, I know that there was a news story that the Globe was letting a number of people go, like 100 people of a 500. Like, I'm
Right.
ballparking the numbers.
Right.
That's a big hit.
Yeah, it really was. It was not easy to see those guys go. Roy works out of Ottawa, so I didn't see him on a daily basis. Schultz sat right across from me.
I hear him on the Fan all
Yeah,
the time.
yeah.
Seems like a great guy.
He's an excellent guy. He's a really good journalist.
Now, these are guys, to me, and you'll know, but I suspect they had more gas in the tank.
Yeah, I think probably that's true. But ultimately, they made the decision that they wanted to take the package. It was a buyout.
Well, they see the writing on the wall.
Right. And I don't know what it's like to be in that position, but presumably if they offer a VSP, you're probably also thinking about, okay, well, if I don't take this, and when's the next one
Yeah,
going to come?
and then I could be putting myself in a bad spot.
Right, because no one wants to just, if you know that there's a VSP, you wouldn't want to retire without collecting one, right?
Because
Because
a VSP was
a voluntary severance
Okay,
package.
okay. I'm working for myself, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm out of the corporate
It's
lingo.
corporate speak. So I'm sure there was a calculus that they did, the two of them, and
It's
they
got to
just
be tough, though.
Yeah, it was tough. It was really tough for us. We didn't want to see them go. I really loved working with both of them, and Robert McLeod, who covered the Blue Jays for us as well, took one. So those three guys retired, and that's collectively a lot of
years and knowledge out the door.
A lot. And Schultz only that year had written an incredible book that he was a finalist for the Business Book Award.
I think he
this year.
referenced you in it, didn't he?
He thanked me, I think,
for your patience in him writing it.
I think but this goes back to always being on and always being reliable. I can remember, this is just one example of how professional David Schultz was. I remember when Brian Murray passed away 2 years ago, I think, the Ottawa Senators GM, and was obviously a huge figure in the game for a long time. And I can remember it was a Saturday morning. So kind of Saturdays, because there is no Sunday Globe and Mail, Saturday may be the one day that people think I might have a day off here, or this is a day off here. So he passed away, and I just remember thinking, well, we got to do something. So I called Schultz, and he was at the public library working on his book. So he was already working.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm sorry to interrupt. I couldn't really tell him to do it. I mean, he was off, but I wanted him to do it, obviously. Yeah. But I didn't want to. It's the weekend. B, he's got his book he's working on. But I wanted to kind of put it out there. If he had said I can't, obviously I'm not going to be. That's not going to upset me.
Somebody else or whatever.
He said, yeah, just nothing to it. Yep, and that was it.
He probably just banged it out.
Yeah, I mean that's what. But that. He probably could have, because that is what that
muscle memory of doing that for years,
having known Murray personally, having covered hockey for so long, knowing Murray's place in the hockey world, that would all come very easily.
But equally
to him.
easy for a guy like that to say, "Sorry,
sure."
I'm tied up.
Or if you're at the end of your career, if you've been doing it for 30 years, maybe you feel what's the big deal? I don't need to do that.
I love that work ethic. I love that.
Yeah,
like, that's huge.
He was he was very easy to work with, and he was a good guy.
So I don't know how familiar you are. We'll jump platforms here, but I, as a longtime commuter, I would listen to the Fan 590, listen to Bob McCown. Do you know Bob? Or
not personally, no.
But like as a personality.
Sure.
So disappeared from the airways. It was a couple months ago, or like within the last year that Rogers Sportsnet let him go. And then you saw that the Nick Kyprios and like this and then Don Cherry for various reasons, but they seem to be just chopping out all these guys. Like, to me, Bob McCown, one of the best sports broadcasters in Canada. What do guys in your industry talk about? And I don't want to get too kind of inside baseball or say anything like that's puts you in an uncomfortable spot because you kind of work in the industry. But like, when you lose a guy like that, what are you guys talking about? Like, how does that impact you? What are your thoughts about this?
It doesn't have a great impact on me or what we do.
I don't mean like in your day-to-day job.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But from an industry perspective, I mean, first of all, I work at a newspaper and in a sports department that is very small. And, we've contracted worse as an industry than most. But you're right. Broadcast, clearly not immune to it either. There were suggestions that this is kind of Schultz's talking point, and he was the expert on sports broadcasting. So I'm kind of paraphrasing what he thought about all of it. But there was kind of an idea that Scott Moore, who's no longer with Sportsnet, was, when he came on, he really tried to bolster their star power on television and radio, and solidifying Bob McCown would have been part of that, and Nick Kypreos, and as you said, all the big names. He's no longer there, and months later, those names start to go. So it's the leadership. Some of the scuttlebutt is that, okay, a new guy has taken over.
Different vision.
Maybe, who knows, financially, maybe they just think we need to shuffle the deck a little bit and realign money, and there's a lot going to few people. We have big names. They're all making big money.
But they're bringing in big ads too, right?
Well, I mean, are they? Probably, but
aren't they?
But I think there may have also been some issues around the NHL viewership on Sportsnet. They signed that massive
a ton of
deal,
money for that,
right? 12
and now
years.
they're bleeding money, and now they're trying to to me, it's cutting off your nose to spite your face. So am I ever going to listen to Fan 590 again? Probably not. And again, maybe I'm the old guy.
There's a lot of great people on the radio. I'm not a religious sports talk radio listener. I do tune in at different times during the week. There are some shows I really like.
You live in town, probably, right?
Right.
So you're not commuting. Like when you're on the highway for an hour and a half.
No, that's for you. And Bob McCown, obviously, at Titan. There's no question. Yeah. That's a huge hole in that business. But I see a guy like Scott MacArthur. I don't know if that name means anything to you. He was at TSN covering the Blue Jays when I was. He's now with Sportsnet on the air. He's doing an incredible job, and I think he's got a huge future in that business. So it's not like there's no farm system, but it does take a long time to become a Bob McCown, and it may never happen for anyone. But I'm not.
So here's where I go with this, and I may be wrong, but you have this massive company, Rogers, and which owns Sportsnet, and they're making all these decisions too. And again, that's they own the company, it's their decision. But I look at what happened to Don Cherry. And wherever you fall on Don Cherry, this, that, racist, not, he had the spot for many, many years, 40 years or so on Hockey Night in Canada, making, great salary for his 7-minute rant or speech or whatever you want to call it. Has this, not his first controversial comment. They let him go. And then I remember thinking, the guy's 82 or something years old. And I remember thinking, I hope, obviously, we're on a podcast right now, right? I'm like, he seems like an older guy. I hope somebody puts him on the air. And within a week, I don't know if you've been following this, but his son, Tim, they start recording. Tim becomes the new Ron MacLean. And he has a podcast up within a week, I think, of him being terminated. And it's up, and it's the #1 podcast in Canada. And now he's doing it once a week. And sometimes when Babcock got fired, he put one out. And now they're 40 minutes long, 42 minutes long. And he's got this avenue. For him, to be able to monetize that and to have that audience, you don't need Rogers anymore. You don't need the gatekeeper anymore. And I would say, I'd sit here and put money on the table and say by the end of 2020, Bob McCown will be doing the same thing. And so these guys have, to me, this opportunity to go straight to the consumer, bypass Rogers. Podcast advertising, Don Cherry could probably be making more money than he was at CBC.
I don't know if that's true. Maybe. I mean, he would have made a lot of money.
Look at the size of the audience.
He would have been making a lot of money, though.
It was $1 million-ish. I heard.
I have no idea.
I heard it was $750 to $1 million. Just
seems plausible,
rumors, right? For him to have that kind of audience, it's just math. It's like cost per 1,000 people to advertise, and what does that look like for a podcast? Do you agree, disagree? Who knows? But I don't know.
Honestly, I have so little exposure to the production of podcasts and the advertising rates that I would just have to, just blindly agree with what you're saying. I have no idea.
Well, and even if just take the money out of the equation, because I don't think Don Cherry, he's done very well for himself. It's, Rogers, I think they're saying, we're going to silence you. And then he pops up and says, yeah, I don't think so.
I'm not thrilled to see people's careers end. But I really didn't like what Don Cherry had to say.
Clearly, is it a good idea to be putting any 82-year-olds on the air uncensored for 7 minutes?
Exactly.
Probably not. You put anyone's grandfather, grandmother on CBC for 7 minutes, they're going to say some
Russian roulette,
wacky shit.
I know, but that was, that's beyond wacky if you ask me. I didn't appreciate it when I heard it. I knew immediately because I was watching it when it happened live. I was like, this is it. I can remember texting my boss and being like,
he's done.
He won't last a week. And it was like two or 3 days.
It was a couple days.
I don't take joy. Like some people rejoice and celebrate other people being fired. I certainly don't warm my hands over someone's smoldering career. I don't like that. No. But there has to be a consequence attached to that kind of rhetoric. And people tried to downplay what he had said, that maybe he was misinterpreted. I don't think he was. I think what he has said previously only affirms that he meant exactly what he said. And then when he had given the opportunity to walk it back, he chose not to. So there are consequences to that. Does that negate everything he's done for hockey? I would hope not. Mm-hmm. It's not like he has been a total net negative to the sport. That being said, if you look at the culture shift that's happening right now inside of hockey with respect to the kinds of attitudes that used to be acceptable, coaching abuse, racism, maybe it was time to start changing that conversation a little bit, of which, for a while, Don Cherry was kind of the leader of that conversation. Yeah. So again, I'm not rejoicing that his career is over.
No. A lot of people are.
They are, and I don't like that. But
I don't want to make it like a the discussion about the content obviously was not cool, and he was taking a task for that. I just think that 20 years ago, if this happens, then he just goes away, and I find it interesting just from a technology standpoint or just a platform standpoint that the guy has the ability to pop up 3 days later or 4 days later and have the top show. He topped Joe Rogan's podcast in Canada for the week.
That's wild.
It's crazy. It's a crazy time we're living in. And so, I don't know. I think are we moving towards an era of the one person journalism outfit? It could be, you could be your own little media entity covering it's and to be able to monetize this stuff, it's crazy.
Yeah, a lot of questions are being asked with respect to how sports are going to be covered and how they're watched. Simon Haupt, who recently joined the Globe Sports Department, he was in the arts section previously. Yeah. He had an incredible story this weekend in the Globe and Mail, just looking at the different ways in which we consume sports now and why is it so hard to figure out what's going on where, because all the rights packages are being split up and fractured. Yeah. And now what used to be cut and dried, get a deluxe cable package and you'll have everything you need. It's no longer true.
Now, there's a lot of
streamers that are gobbling up rights to specific sports. I'm a tennis fan. If I want to watch tennis, TSN has rights to the ATP Tour, but any given week, an ATP Tour schedule could have 3 different tournaments on it. So if I want to watch the other 2, which sometimes I do, I subscribe to Tennis TV, which is an ATP platform. Right. The tour itself owns it. If I want to watch WTA, well, as we saw when Bianca Andreescu won Indian Wells, you couldn't watch that on TSN because they don't have the WTA rights, and neither does Sportsnet. DAZN has those rights.
It's harder to watch.
People were freaking out because they thought, I want to watch our Canadian 18-year-old take a run at a Masters tournament, and no one knew how to do it. And people were railing against the cable companies when in fact, it's not really their fault. They don't own the rights. So you have to be watching DAZN. You have to stream it. So it can be real gymnastics to try to figure out how to watch a simple game sometimes.
Well, even with Netflix and now Amazon's got theirs and Apple's coming out with Disney Plus. Like it's becoming an expensive proposition, and it's very fragmented, as you said. So it'd be interesting to see where it ends up. What is the favorite thing you've ever written of all the hundreds of stories that you've done? What's the one that stands out?
There are probably 3 off the top of my head that I am proud of, which is, I don't use that term loosely.
I get what you mean by that. Yeah.
The first one was in my last year of, now I don't know what this says about my career, because I'm going to bring up one that I was still in university when I did.
Yeah.
So what have I done in the downtime?
Yeah.
Maybe not enough good stuff, but I'm also an editor now. So, not my main job to write. However, I did a story it was actually about my hometown, and there was a lot of natural gas development happening just outside the community. I'm from a place called Sussex, New Brunswick.
Okay.
6,000 or 7,000 population, a lot of local service districts surrounding it, a lot of farming going on, a lot of strong rural population outside of kind of the town center.
Yeah.
So there was one of those service districts, there was maybe 50 families had lost all their well water. So when you live outside of a municipality, you're responsible to drill your own wells, right? So you have you're not going out with a pail, but your house is hooked into an aquifer that you've paid someone to drill. Mm. And those aquifers on this kind of stretch of country road there was no water in them anymore. And people believed that the company that was fracking for natural gas had cracked and drained the aquifer,
right,
or the water was being diverted elsewhere. And they had spent all this money because it's not cheap.
Yeah.
And so they were looking for help, and they wanted the government to compensate them. The government didn't want to. So the government said, the provincial government, here are water tanks, and we're going to truck water into your house every week.
Jeez.
So huge inconvenience.
And cost
to the taxpayer. Meanwhile, the mine that is now shut down, sadly, that's a whole other story. But they were not admitting any culpability. No one really had any proof. No geologist had surveyed it and said, like,
it's circumstantial.
Here's evidence that like the fracking going on it was a potash mine, but they were in partnership with a gas company that was fracking wells. So it was really just a real nonstop fight back and forth. And I had covered it when I was working at the local paper during the summer. And I, for my final project in my newspaper program, I did that story, and it was like a 4,000 word story about all these people,
big story,
living without water. It was. And I look back on it sometimes and I think I actually didn't do a terrible job with this. A lot of things I would change, but I thought I came at it quite aggressively, and I'm still proud of it. So that would
great.
be
Is
one.
it online somewhere?
I don't think it is.
Oh.
I think I have a PDF because it went in the student paper. So I think I have the PDF of the student paper.
If you send it to me, I'll stick it on the show notes.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it. I'm sure I have it on my email somewhere. 2 years ago, I was out in New Brunswick for the Globe. I had pitched them a story about this man in New Brunswick called Jackie Vautour. He's kind of a Canadian folk hero. He's been living in Koochipakwak National Park, which is past Moncton, illegally for 40 years, squatting in the park. His family lived there. They expropriated the community to build the park. Everyone took a payout of, nominal money, and he said, I don't accept this, and I'm not moving. And in the intervening 40 years have just been crazy. There were.
What does he live in?
He lives in what looks. It's about the size of this office that we're in, and
so it's like 15 feet by 10 feet or something.
I would say, yeah, or like maybe 20 by 20, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe a little wider, but a very small little home, just off the highway, near the Koochipakwak Bay. Again, a Canadian folk hero to some people. And I'd known about him growing up my whole life because Jackie Vautour, and some people painted him as this kook, which he is, trust me, but also kind of like a freedom fighter. Like, you can't move me, despite, government having eminent domain and being allowed to do that legally. He's like, I won't do it. I won't move. So he didn't move he's still there today. And he's still in a standoff with the government. So I went out there and told his story because he was kind of back in court. And the thing about Jackie is he's quite litigious. Like he's looking for every feasible argument to have the decision to expropriate him overturned so he can have the legal deed to his land back. I don't think that will ever happen. He's tried everything. But I wanted to do that because I knew he's not going to be around forever, and I hadn't really read about him for a long time. And so I went out and did a story, and I was very happy with how it turned out. They put it on A1.
Wow.
So that was, for me, it was my first A1 story at the Globe and Mail, and I was very pleased with that. Yeah. Yeah.
And so when was that?
That was 2 years, 2017.
And that one's online.
Summer 2017. That is online, yes.
Okay, cool. So we'll put a link to that. And what was the third one?
The third one's a story I did last year. It was a personal story about the Humboldt bus crash.
So when you got nominated for an award for that.
Right. I was nominated for a short feature for the NNA's National Newspaper Awards. It was about my own personal experience playing junior hockey, because before I went to university, when I graduated high school, for 3 years I played junior A.
So you were the guy on the bus.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the thrust of my story, was that I know because that was a junior A team that crashed, and I've taken the bus everywhere, and I had these relationships, and it is, I read it recently just because hockey's been maligned so harshly recently, the culture of hockey, which has a lot of problems.
Sure.
I'm not glossing those over, but there is some good in there, and I feel fortunate enough to have experienced that good along with very little bad. Obviously, a lot of people experience a lot of bad things, and those stories are being told, and that's great and important. But I was glad that mine wasn't like that, because it really did help me. I think it instilled a lot of positive values that I'm using as an adult.
Right.
And that was the thrust of my story. Yes.
It's not that long.
No, it was under 1,000 words, because to be able to be nominated as a short feature, it has to be under 1,000 words.
What do you think about it resonated with people? Because that's like when you Google search you, that's the first thing that comes up.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's good to know. I'm glad it's not some salacious picture.
Frat party from 10 years ago or something.
I got a lot of really kind email from that one, which I don't think has ever happened.
It takes a lot to get people to usually they're emailing you for something negative.
Yeah, most of the
time. For people to send you something positive,
a lot of really nice, a lot of really thoughtful.
From hockey people, from parents.
A lot of parents. One of them was just like almost knocked me over. She was talking about her son and how he was playing junior A in BC, and she said, I've been searching for a way to empathize with like the grief and loss that these people are feeling right now, and I think I found it in your story.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, are you kidding me? I wrote that in an hour. And I think that only because it meant so much to me, and it was very easy to access that.
Yeah.
But I couldn't believe that. Even just that email alone, I was like, wow, there are nice people in the world. The internet is not a nice place.
No.
By and large.
Can be. But generally it's a lot.
But it's really not. It's very negative. A lot of pot shots, a lot of ad hominem attacks.
Do you get a lot of that?
I don't, because I don't really engage.
My sister gets a ton of that.
Yes. Now your sister's she's covering some really intense
vaccines
news.
And vaping. People are like,
she's obviously a very tough reporter, because she's doing a great job.
It's tough because people, everyone's like, oh, you're a shill. You're getting paid. Like, really?
Yeah. People have crazy ideas.
Yeah.
And being a journalist can be challenging because of that. You have to ask yourself a lot of questions. Being a reporter is very difficult, and I'm not really one anymore. I still am writing, but only occasionally.
You're in the business.
I'm an editor, so I don't have to deal with that as much as my colleagues do.
Would you, let's say you're in school today. Mm-hmm. It's 2020, basically, and journalism is what it is. Would you still go into journalism?
I can't believe I'm taking this long to answer. I haven't asked myself that question. I would say no. I probably wouldn't.
That's troubling.
Yeah. It just the hiring prospects are so bleak. If I were, but here's the catch is that I was very dumb when I was 20. So I may still do it anyway because I'm so stupid. I may just
like if you
barge ahead anyway because I'm so stupid.
If you knew then what you knew now, you wouldn't go into
it. If through some strange time warp I have the knowledge and like the current mental capacity I do as a 33-year-old, as a 20-year-old, I would not do it. It just seems very unlikely that, especially sports, but really any newspaper job, it seems increasingly unlikely that there's any positive outlook for getting a job, getting your foot in the door, and then establishing yourself. And again, as I said, it's not pleasant all the time. And I'm not a person that struggles with criticism. I think I feel very helped when people come to me with constructive criticism.
Right.
I feel almost blessed that someone takes the time to try to show me what I've done wrong so I can do a better job.
Right.
My boss does it a lot, and I'm very grateful for that. But when you're getting attacked, which happens to a lot of close friends of mine and colleagues, I don't know how I would handle that. It just seems like there are so many unreasonable and irrational people in the world who react so harshly, even to things as ultimately meaningless as sports. I mean, again, on the grand scale, we're not curing disease here. We're covering people who make millions of dollars a year to play a game, and they've earned that money.
Sure.
But just because they're being criticized, like, you know, they're going to go home and sleep in their mansion and drive their Mercedes.
Missed a ball.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah. And it's just fun. Like, it's all relative. Like when someone criticizes an athlete, they're not criticizing them in the context of like me and you, like we could do better. No, they're being criticized in the context of the major league that they're playing in.
Yeah.
It's a prerequisite and understood that they are the best in the world at what they do by virtue of being on that field or ice surface at the highest level. You know, you're not there because of a fluke. So, you know, I think they can handle it.
So the fact that you said you wouldn't go into journalism today, I don't think you're the only one that would say that. Like, I'm not sure, you know, I started out in journalism and then I flipped over to corporate communications. I'm not sure I would get into it today, but like, you know, I think we need it more today than ever. You know, like people talk about fake news and I resisted, you know, I realized that there's, you know, Russian bots and trolls and stuff like that. And I realized that there was an element of this in the whole Donald Trump thing, but like, I really believed on some level that like there was still good, hardworking journalists with ethics and stuff out there. And like, it just seems like even if you write a decent story about something, you almost have to put like a clickbait headline on it or nobody's going to read it. So like where are we going here? What's journalism looking like 10 years from now?
Yeah, no crystal ball here. All I can say is I look at a place like the New York Times and they're hiring and they have, you know, 1,000 journalists. They're covering the world and they're doing a great job of it.
So what do you think is the different, like what are they doing differently than like the Sioux Star, which is my hometown paper?
Wow, that's challenge. I mean, I would say they're investing in
Not
journalism.
to compare them.
Well, exactly. It's, the scale is difficult to compare, but I from people I know who work in the business and just from media news, it sounds like that the Times is investing in journalism and they're seeing a return in digital subscriptions. They have a ton of them. And if you can go read any Columbia Journalism or Review Journalism story, and you'll they're having returns. They're doing well. I don't know how the locals survive. I think
a lot of them aren't.
Well, they're not from the traditional print model, but I know that this has been happening and being talked about for a long time. But has there been enough runway for local crowdfunded startups to actually show that they're viable? I mean, I think a lot of those are just getting started, and maybe in the future those will turn out to be a viable model. I know it's not totally applicable to local news, but an outlet like Canada Land, which is a media criticism site, they have a ton of subscribers, and that's all
like a Patreon model or something.
Yes, exactly, the Patreon model. So, and other people use that as well for their own podcasts or their YouTube videos.
They serve an important role. So
definitely.
not so it's all doom and gloom. And we'll wrap up because I want to respect your time. What, you know, is there a silver lining? Like what positive advice or guidance would you give to someone who is 20 and says, you know what, I still want to get into it. I still want to tell stories. Like what would you say to them?
Well, that's the right attitude, because I hear from a lot of young people who want to get into sports journalism. What I tell them with respect to sports journalism is that your best bet, unless you want to go work and grind at TSN or Sportsnet. I did it. I worked at Sportsnet for 8 months.
Tough places to work too.
It's a content mill, and I was a web editor posting stories. Like, it was brutal. I had a great boss. I like the colleagues, but the job was brutal. Like, there was no journalistic value in that.
The problem with those places, the sports places especially, is there's so many people that want to get in that they don't have to pay you much and they don't have to treat you very well. And if you go away, they'll just get 10 more of you.
Yeah, you're very replaceable. I agree. So I tell people who want to get into sports journalism, if you want to go at it the hard way, that's your only way in, is those two places. Fortunately, The Athletic exists, and they seem to be hiring young people, and they are a print journalism model that seems to be working right now. So, I mean, that's one silver lining. Otherwise, I say you need to come at it laterally by doing other journalism. Just do journalism. If you can find a great story that has social implications and it relates to sports, it's not going to be a game wrap of the Raptors, and it's not going to be a player profile of OG Anunoby. Those aren't going to help you. But if you can find a great social story with respect to sports, or a great business or a great enterprise story with respect to sports, those would be your best shots at getting even a chance at a big outlet as a writer and reporter. Or don't cover or follow your sports, enjoy them, consume them, but make sure that your journalism is in the news or in business, because once you are a great journalist, you can work for any section. Obviously, there are exceptions, and there's going to be institutional knowledges that are going to be required.
But storytelling is more important,
and reporting
structure,
but also just reporting, getting facts, practicing your judgment, interviewing skills, interpersonal skills. So I always tell them your best chance might be to go away from sports to get into sports. Right. And if you want to be a journalist, if you want to be a writer that covers long form stories or what have you. So otherwise, when people ask me, I had this kind of like form email I sent to a couple of people. I had a professor whose son wanted to do it, and I sent him, must have been the most discouraging email you could send someone, because I think that you need to discourage people as much as possible, because these programs like Ryerson Sports Media, like, what are you selling? Like, what a terrible degree. Really, a Ryerson Sports Media degree, that is a waste of money, and there are no jobs for those people. So I tell people, don't do this. Here's every reason why you shouldn't do it. But the best part is, like, we don't need more sports journalists. We need doctors and firefighters. So, like, you'll do great at that. You'll be a great doctor. Good luck. And then if people can kind of ignore that
are the ones who might make it through.
That's it. If they don't care about any of that, then I have great hopes for them.
And you're probably doing the other ones a favor too.
Exactly. It's just, again, we don't need more sports journalists in this world. And but there are a lot of vital jobs that need people, smart, hardworking, kind people, and all these kids that come to me, I said, you should do that instead. But again, if they really want to do it, they won't give a shit that I've just told them that there's no hope. They're going to do it anyway. They're just like Warren Weeks, right? They're just like, forget it. I'm going through the door. I don't care if there's no job. I'll make one for myself.
There you go.
And that's the attitude I think that you need to have.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. All right, we'll wrap it up.
Thank you,
Ross. Thank you very much for being here.
It was a real pleasure.
Big thank you to Jamie Ross for taking the time to chat with me. And as always, big thank you to you for listening. Please take a second to subscribe to the show and leave a comment or feedback on Apple Podcasts. Helps other people find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.